Welcome, everyone. I'm truly grateful you've joined us tonight. As you settle in, let the calm stories under the stars and the soft tunes of the moon embrace your heart. Take a deep, soothing breath and allow the quiet magic of voice to guide you gently toward peaceful dreams. So let's start our stories, where every word is meant to calm and comfort. In the small town of Stowe, Vermont, a place known for its winding mountain roads, the crisp chill of autumn, and a community that feels more like family than neighbors, Daniel lived with a quiet ache in his heart. Every morning, he would wake in his modest home just a few blocks from the Stowe recreation path and make himself a cup of coffee. In those early, silent moments, his thoughts would drift to Marianne, the woman who had once filled his days with laughter and warmth. Marianne had a way of making ordinary mornings feel special. She loved tending the little garden behind their home, where wildflowers and herbs grew in a burst of color against the backdrop of Vermont's ever-changing skies. Daniel would often sit by the window, watching the soft light filter through the trees, and remember how Marianne's gentle smile brightened even the coldest days. Life, however, had taken an unexpected turn. 2 years ago, a sudden accident had taken Marianne away, leaving Daniel with memories that both comforted and hurt. Strolling along Main Street in Stowe, he recalled the times they'd shared a quiet laugh at the local cafe, or watched the sunset from the steps of the old library. Every familiar corner of the town now held a bittersweet echo of her presence. On many afternoons, Daniel found solace in walking along the West Branch River. The gentle murmur of the water reminded him of the conversations he and Marianne once had about everything and nothing. He'd pause by the riverbank, feeling the cool breeze on his face, and let his thoughts wander back to summer evenings filled with simple joys. A shared ice cream cone from the corner shop, or the way Marianne would run her fingers through the tall grass. In winter, Stowe transformed into a quiet wonderland. The town's streets, lined with snow-dusted lampposts, carried an almost magical hush. Daniel would sit by his window, watching the frost form intricate patterns on the glass, each delicate design stirring memories of Marianne, carefully wrapping him in her favorite scarf on chilly mornings. Even the silence of those long nights was filled with her ghostly laughter, a sound that both warmed and pained him. Daniel's path to healing wasn't one he walked alone. At the Stowe Community Center, he began attending small gatherings where locals shared stories of love, loss, and resilience. One evening, an older gentleman spoke softly about dancing with his late wife at a town fair, a memory that resonated deeply with Daniel. In that room, filled with honest voices and shared heartache, he felt the weight of his solitude lighten just a little. Encouraged by the kindness of his community, Daniel found new purpose at the Stowe Public Library. Volunteering there, he spent quiet hours reading aloud to children and seniors alike. His voice, sometimes shaky with the rawness of his own sorrow, slowly began to carry the gentle cadence of hope. Each story he shared became a small tribute to Marianne's legacy of warmth and compassion. There were still days when the grief was almost too heavy to bear, a day when a familiar song on the radio or a stray petal on the sidewalk would pull him back into memories of Marianne. But gradually, Daniel learned that his love for her was not something to be locked away with his pain. It was a part of him, woven into the fabric of his everyday life, whether he was walking the winding roads of Stowe or simply sitting in his favorite chair on a quiet evening. Late at night, when the town was cloaked in darkness, and the only sound was the whisper of the wind through the pine trees, Daniel would step onto his creaky porch. There, beneath a sky spangled with stars, he'd find himself talking softly to Marianne, as if she were there with him. In those solitary moments, he discovered that while her physical presence was gone, the echo of her spirit lingered in every cherished memory, every gentle breeze, and every corner of the town they had once loved together. Even though the pain of loss was a constant companion, Daniel began to see it not as an enemy, but as a quiet reminder of a love that had truly changed him. In the everyday scenes of Stowe, on a snowy morning, during a walk along the river, at community gatherings, he found that Marianne's memory still shone through, a soft and enduring light guiding him forward. And so, amid the familiar rhythms of a small Vermont town, Daniel carried on, learning that while the echoes of the past might sometimes sting, they were also the traces of a beautiful life once shared. Each day was a slow, steady step toward accepting that even in deep sorrow, there could be moments of peace, and that love, in all its forms, endures. Long ago, in the kingdom of Evermere, there was a princess who vanished without a trace. She was young, with a restless heart, and in a spirit that longed for more than castle walls and royal duties. The festival of lights had come, and as lanterns drifted across the sky like golden fireflies, the princess slipped away, drawn to the whisper of adventure. She wandered beyond the safety of the palace, past the gardens, past the lake where the lanterns cast their reflections. The mountains called to her, their peaks hidden beneath a veil of silver mist. She thought she would only explore for a short while, just long enough to taste freedom. But the mist rose thick and fast, swallowing the path behind her. The warmth of the festival faded, replaced by the cold hush of the mist-veiled peaks. She turned back, but the way home was gone. The princess called out, but no voice answered. The wind carried only silence, and the towering cliffs loomed like ancient watchers. She wandered for days, lost and hungry, until at last, when she had nearly given up hope, someone found her. A woman, cloaked in twilight, stepped from the mist. Her hair was silver as moonlight, her eyes deep as the sky before dawn. She did not ask who the princess was, nor did she seem surprised to see her there. "You do not belong to the mountains," the woman said softly. The princess shivered. "I don't know how to leave." The woman studied her for a long moment, then reached out a hand. "Then I will show you the way." Together they traveled through the mountains. The woman spoke little, but when she did, her words felt like echoes of forgotten stories. She told the princess of the mountain spirits, of the quiet watchers of the world who saw time differently than mortals. "The mountains do not take without reason," she said one night as they sat beside a fire that burned blue and cold. "Then why did they take me?" the princess asked. The woman watched the flames for a long time before replying, "Because you did not know where you belonged." The princess did not understand. She had always belonged to Evermere, to the kingdom that awaited her return. Hadn't she? But as the days passed, something in her changed. She began to listen, to the way the wind carried voices through the peaks, to the way the rivers carved their stories into the earth. She learned to hear the silence between the trees, to see the life hidden in the quietest places. And slowly, she understood. One morning, as the first golden light touched the peaks, the woman led her to the highest ridge. Below, beyond the mist, lay Evermere, so small, so distant, yet still waiting. "It is time," the woman said. The princess turned to her, heart heavy. "Will I see you again?" The woman only smiled, the kind of smile that was both an answer and a mystery. And then, as softly as the morning breeze, she was gone. The princess found her way home that day. The castle gates opened, and the people wept at the sight of her. Her father, once so strong, held her as though he would never let go. The kingdom whispered of miracles, of lost daughters returned by the gods' mercy. But the princess never spoke of the woman in the mist, nor of the things she had learned in the hush of the mountains. Some stories are not meant to be told, and yet, on quiet nights, when the wind carried a familiar whisper and the stars burned a little too bright, she would close her eyes and listen, and she would remember. I hadn't been home in years, not because I didn't want to, but because life has a way of making distance feel necessary. Work, responsibilities, the steady rush of time, I let them all build a wall between me and the place I once called home. My mother used to call every Sunday just to hear my voice, just to ask when I'd visit next. And every time I had an excuse. "Soon, Mom. Work is busy." "Maybe next month, Dad, I promise. I'll try." But time is cruel. It gives and gives until suddenly it doesn't anymore. The last call came on a gray morning. My father's voice, quiet and tired. "She's not doing well. If you can come home, you should." So for the first time in years, I boarded the train back home. The landscape rolled past in soft blurs, golden fields, quiet rivers, the winding roads I had once traveled as a child. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time I had been on this train. I was younger then, eager to leave, to chase something bigger than the small town that had raised me. I had promised my parents I'd always come back, but promises, like memories, sometimes fade. The train rocked gently, the hum of the tracks beneath me steady and familiar. And then, as if time had folded in on itself, I saw her, my mother, just as she had been when I was little. She sat beside me, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes full of quiet understanding. "You look tired," she said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I am." She nodded as if she had always known. "You've been carrying too much on your own." "I didn't mean to stay away so long," I whispered. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face like she used to when I was a child. I know. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes. I should have come sooner. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "You're here now." I closed my eyes, wanting to hold on to the moment, to stay in this in-between place where she was still strong, still here. But when I opened them, the seat beside me was empty, and the train was pulling into the station. I stepped onto the platform, my heart pounding. My father stood there, his shoulders heavier than I remembered, his face lined with worry. The moment he saw me, something in him crumbled. "You came," he breathed. "I'm here," I said, and when he pulled me into his arms, I let myself hold on. Home felt smaller than I remembered, quieter. The house smelled the same, though, faintly of cinnamon and old books, of something warm and familiar. I found her in the room where sunlight streamed through lace curtains, her frail hands resting on the quilt she had sewn years ago. Her breathing was soft, steady but slow. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. "Mom," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, and then with a quiet, knowing smile, she opened her eyes. "You came home," she murmured. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I'm so sorry." She squeezed my hand, the smallest movement, but it held a lifetime of love. "You were never far," she said. "Not really." I stayed with her for hours, talking, listening, just being. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft golds and pinks, she sighed, her eyes fluttering closed. "I was waiting for you," she whispered. And then, just like the setting sun, she was gone. The funeral was quiet. My father held my hand the whole time, as if afraid I would slip away too, and maybe once I would have, but not anymore. That night, as I stood in the kitchen, the place where she had made me countless meals, where she had hummed old songs while washing dishes, I found a note tucked into the corner of the table. "Come home often. Don't let time steal the things that matter." I held the note to my chest, breathing in the scent of home, of love that had never left, even when I had. And I made a promise, not one spoken, but one I would keep. I wouldn't wait until it was too late, because love, no matter how far we wander, is always waiting for us to come home. I have always loved the sky. When I was young, I would sit on the hillside near our cottage, watching the clouds shift and swirl like brushstrokes on a vast blue canvas. My mother used to say the sky had a painter, someone who shaped the dawn with golden hues and softened the dusk with quiet purples. I used to imagine them, a quiet, gentle artist, dipping their brush into the sun's light, painting the world into morning. I would close my eyes and wish, just once, to meet them. But childhood wishes fade, and time has a way of moving us forward, whether we're ready or not. I lost my mother in the winter when the rivers froze and the trees stood bare against the wind. One evening, just after the snow began to fall, she called me to her bedside. Her fingers were thin and cool as they curled around mine. "Do you remember the sky painter?" she asked, her voice no more than a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. She smiled, so softly it broke my heart. "When you miss me, look to the sky. I'll be there, in every sunrise and every star that lingers past dawn." That night, the sky was the clearest I had ever seen. A deep, endless blue, dotted with stars that shimmered like candle flames. I wanted to believe she was there, watching over me. But grief is heavy, and belief is fragile. For a long time, I stopped looking at the sky. The days passed in a blur of gray, and no matter how bright the sun rose, I felt lost in the shadows it left behind. Then, one evening, as I sat by the window of our quiet, empty cottage, I saw something strange, a soft glow just beyond the trees. I followed it without thinking, my feet moving over the frost-kissed grass, until I reached the hillside where I used to watch the clouds. And there, standing beneath the sky, streaked with the last embers of daylight, was a figure with a paintbrush in hand. They were neither young nor old, their presence both familiar and unknown. Their long cloak rippled like twilight itself, and as they lifted their brush, color bled into the horizon, blues melting into oranges, purples deepening into night. I held my breath. "Are you?" They turned to me, and though their face was shadowed, I felt their warmth, as if sunlight itself had taken shape. "I am the one who colors the sky," they said gently. "And you have been missing for some time." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I stopped looking up. They nodded, as if they already knew. Grief does that. It weighs the head down, makes it hard to see the beauty that remains. I clenched my hands. "It's just, she's gone." The painters stepped closer, their voice like the hush of waves against the shore. "She isn't gone. She is here, in every sunrise and every quiet star. She's in the golden light that touches your skin, in the hush of the wind through the trees. She never left." I blinked against the tears that blurred the edges of the world. "But I can't hear her anymore." The painter smiled, lifting their brush once more. "Then let me help you listen." With a gentle sweep, they painted the night, a deep, velvety blue, scattered with soft, glowing stars. The moment the final stroke touched the sky, the wind carried something familiar, a voice, no louder than a whisper, wrapped in the hush of the evening. "I'm still here." A sob broke free from my chest, but it did not hurt. It was the kind of sadness that was soft, warm, filled with love. I tilted my head back, looking at the stars for the first time in what felt like forever. The painter watched me, their brush now at rest. "Whenever you feel lost," they murmured, "just look up." And with that, they stepped into the night, fading into the very sky they had painted. I never saw them again. But from that night on, I looked at the sky differently. And every morning, as the sun painted the world in gold, I would whisper, just as my mother once had, "I see you." And I knew wherever she was, she could hear me too. Beneath a velvet sky, sprinkled with countless shimmering stars, there lay a secret garden that awoke only when the world slept. This was no ordinary garden. It was a sanctuary for hearts heavy with loss, a quiet haven where sorrow mingled with gentle hope. Every night, Leora, a tender soul marked by memories of love long faded, would wander down the worn path to this nocturnal refuge. There, amid the silver glow of moonlight, she sought solace from a grief that had both haunted and defined her. The garden's entrance was framed by ancient, gnarled trees whose intertwined branches whispered secrets of old. As Leora stepped through the creaking iron gate, a cool breeze caressed her face, carrying with it the delicate scent of night-blooming jasmine and the soft murmur of rustling leaves. Each blossom, bathed in pale light, appeared to sing a silent lullaby, a hymn of remembrance and bittersweet beauty. In that tender moment, the garden seemed to embrace her, assuring her that even in the depths of sadness, there was a quiet grace waiting to be discovered. In the heart of the garden, a small fountain trickled softly, its water glistening like liquid moonbeams on time-worn stone. Leora settled on a nearby bench, gazing into the rippling pool as memories unfurled within her mind. The gentle sound of the water echoed the cadence of tears once shed, each drop a tribute to a love that had illuminated her world before vanishing into the past. In the glimmering reflections, she recalled the warm laughter of a cherished companion, the gentle caress of a hand that once promised forever, and the subtle comfort of shared dreams. Though the memories were laced with sorrow, They also held the tender promise of healing. As the night deepened, the garden revealed its subtle enchantments. A majestic tree with silvered bark stood at its center, its leaves shimmering as if dusted with stardust. Leora believed this ancient sentinel to be the keeper of the garden's most profound secrets, a living chronicle of every tender joy and lingering pain. Beneath its boughs, the tree's murmurs, like soft-spoken verses from an old lullaby, soothed the ache within her. It was as if the tree understood that grief, when embraced, could transform into a quiet strength, a beacon guiding the weary heart through darkness toward a gentle dawn. Wandering slowly along a mossy path lined with delicate night-blooming flowers, Leora encountered small tokens of the past. A faded ribbon caught in the curling branches recalled a forgotten promise. A weathered photograph, almost hidden by time's tender touch on an old bench, whispered of moments filled with laughter and light. Even a fragile note, scrawled on a fallen petal, spoke silently of love once shared and now dearly missed. Each token was a verse in the silent ballad of her life, a collection of memories that, though tinged with sorrow, sparkled with the remnants of beauty and warmth. Under the soft luminescence of the moon, the garden seemed to hum with quiet empathy. The rustle of leaves, the delicate chirp of distant crickets, and the gentle sigh of the wind together formed a symphony of solace. In that gentle orchestra, Leora could feel the presence of every cherished memory, even those that brought a pang of sadness. The music of the night reassured her that no grief was insurmountable, that within the fabric of every tear lay the seeds of renewal and peace. In the stillness of the midnight air, Leora's heart wavered between sorrow and acceptance. Each step along the winding path allowed her to acknowledge her pain without being overwhelmed by it. Instead, she began to see her grief as a quiet companion, a soft shadow that reminded her of the love that once warmed her soul. In this gentle interplay of light and shadow, she discovered that sadness and beauty were not enemies, but intertwined reflections of a life deeply felt. Time slipped by unnoticed until the first hints of dawn began to color the horizon. The garden, which had been alive with the magic of night, slowly yielded to the soft caress of early morning light. The moon's glow waned, and the stars faded into the pastel promise of a new day. Yet even as the blossoms gently closed their petals in farewell to the night, their quiet fragrance lingered, a tender reminder of the memories that would forever reside in the heart. Before leaving, Leora paused beneath the ancient silver-barked tree, its leaves now dimming with the coming light. In the hush of those final moments, she whispered a promise to herself, a vow to carry the cherished memories, both sweet and sorrowful, as lanterns along her life's journey. She understood that while the ache of loss might never fully disappear, it could transform into a gentle strength that allowed her to appreciate the fleeting beauty of every sunrise, every whisper of the wind, and every quiet, heartfelt memory. As the garden slowly receded into the embrace of daylight, Leora stepped back onto the familiar path with a heart both heavy and tenderly uplifted. The night had taught her that sadness, like the soft murmur of a lullaby, was an inseparable part of the human experience, a reminder that every tear carried the echo of love. Though her journey was marked by a melancholy that could not be erased, it was also illuminated by the beauty of moments lived and loved. In that delicate balance of grief and grace, Leora found her quiet strength. The Garden of Whispered Memories, with its luminous night and gentle farewells, had become her silent confidant, a haven where the sorrow of the past mingled with the hopeful promise of tomorrow. And as the first light of dawn embraced the world, she knew that, even in the bittersweet depths of her heart, there would always be room for the tender glow of healing and hope. With each new day, the echoes of the night would remain with her, a soft, enduring melody that whispered of love lost and found, of pain embraced and transformed, and of the timeless truth that even in sadness, there is a beauty profound enough to light the way.